Welcome back, grade 7 and 8. In this video, we're going to be exploring more about extending human vision. So not only how do our eyes work, but how can we go beyond what we can just see, and how can we use different things around us in order to enhance what we can see as well. Human knowledge about our planet and the universe was very limited until we developed tools to extend our vision. We now have the ability to peer into the tiny world of microorganisms and out into the vast reaches of outer space. The tools we use for these inquiries seem quite different from each other, but they're all based on the same understanding of light, mirrors, and lenses. Let's begin by taking a look at telescopes. Telescopes, kind of like the one that we see here, help us to see distant objects more clearly. In a refracting telescope, and by the way, this here is a picture or an example of a refracting telescope, which we're going to compare to a reflecting telescope in a minute. Light from a distant object is collected and focused by a convex lens called the objective lens. And you see that objective lens here, the light comes in and it is refracted into a particular spot. A second lens, called the eyepiece lens, which is what we look through, works as a magnifying glass to enlarge the image of that distant object that is being converged in this particular spot. A reflecting telescope, and here's an example of a reflecting telescope, uses a concave mirror to collect rays of light from a distant object. So here we have rays of light from a distant object coming in, and using a concave mirror bounces it or reflects it back to a plane mirror here for us to be able to see it. The mirror is called the primary or objective mirror, and it forms a real image which is then magnified by the eyepiece lens. So just different ways in which we can use refraction or reflection using either a concave or a convex object in order to allow us to be able to see things that are much more distant. The lens in a refracting telescope and the mirror in a reflecting telescope act as a collector of light. Reflecting and refracting telescopes must have a large collector, either a lens or a mirror, in order to gather as much light as possible from that distant object. The collector then focuses the light on a particular image. The further the image is from the lens, the greater the magnification needs to be in order to be able to see it more clearly. Similarly, the further the image is from the mirror in a reflecting telescope, the greater the magnification. For the greatest magnification, the telescope needs to have as large a distance as possible between the objects being viewed, like a star or a planet, for example, and its image. This is why some telescopes that we end up needing to use in order to see some of those distant objects more clearly need to be so enormous. Well, now let's switch over to binoculars, another device that allows us to extend our human vision. Binoculars are actually two reflecting telescopes mounted side by side. So we see a similar sort of thing taking place here as we do in a reflecting telescope. You can imagine how different it would be, though, to hold up two long telescopes. In binoculars, the telescopes are shortened by placing glass blocks inside, and these blocks, called prisms, serve as plane mirrors. So what happens is we take a look through the object, the light comes from the object through here, it bounces off a prism, bounces off another prism, and eventually makes it to our eyes. Rather than traveling down the long tube of a telescope, light in binoculars are reflected back and forth inside a short tube, as we can see here in this particular image. And this allows us to be able to really change the direction of light, to be able to see an object that might not be directly in front of us, but that might be slightly to the left or slightly to the right, as our binoculars make things either, yeah, more to the right or more to the left. As we learned last year, at least as the grade 8s learned last year, in grade 7s we will learn this a little bit more next year. A magnifying glass is a simple kind of microscope. Generally, magnifying glasses are used for magnifications up to about 10 times actual size. In 1676, however, Dutch scientist Anton van Leeuwenhoek was able to see bacteria by using a single convex lens. The magnification required for this feat was 280 times the normal image of the object. Now we have modern compound light microscopes that can easily magnify objects well beyond 2,000 times magnification. Compound microscopes have an objective lens that forms a real image of the object. Then an eyepiece lens magnifies the image even further. Compound microscopes use more than one lens, like we see in the image here, in the picture here. We have one lens in the objective, which is the part that turns, where we can focus in different magnification levels, and we have another in the eyepiece to improve the sharpness of the image. Grade 7s, we will learn much more about this next year. By means of microscopes, scientists learned that all living tissue consists of cells. They saw how these cells function and reproduce. They also saw how cells grew wild when they became cancerous and how they were destroyed by viruses. Now, scientists are using microscopes to study all sorts of different things, whether it be the genetic makeup of cells or whether it be to understand different issues or viruses in the world around us. Similarly, the development of telescopes in the 17th century triggered an explosion of scientific knowledge about our universe. No longer were planets just wandering points of light in the dark sky, but now they became worlds of their own. For astronomers, the starry sky became an expanding cosmos of galaxies linked in true gigantic formations. Telescopes and microscopes have limits in terms of their magnification and their ability, but reveal the difference between one large object and two smaller ones. And this is just one of the amazing discoveries that God has allowed us to explore and learn more about, as the gigantic world or the gigantic universe around us is able to be understood more. And we can now understand the stars and the planets that surround us, as well as using lenses and mirrors to understand things that are too small for us to see as well, using microscopes. And so lenses and mirrors and our knowledge about light has really made the world a lot smaller and a lot bigger all at the very same time.